Window 10, can I go outside now?
No!
Please, with a cherry on top.
No!
Please, with sprinkles on top.
No!
3 days later.
Please, with Ebola and AIDS on top.
Fuck!
Since we are in a pandemic right now, let's watch some game reviews. Before Angry Video Game Nerd, before Classic Game Room, before Nostalgia Critic, around the same time as Roger Ebert. I might have found these reviews in my recommendations and I never watched them ever until Catacris had made a video on them. So I decided to make my own take on these videos and make this game review show talked about to death. I never knew there were game reviews even during the 90s in the Nintendo 64 and PS1 era. I know movie reviews had been around much longer than game reviews because Roger Ebert and because of the Fair Use Act of 1976, the law that keeps us gaming and movie YouTubers legally safe. The channel that archives these reviews is called Navigator, and the show is called Gaming in the Clinton Years. Why that name? Just make a show at the same time as someone was president and naming after that president. How the hell is Bill Clinton involved in the gaming world?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
And why is the logo just a picture of Bill Clinton? I don't know what game this theme song came from or it's an original tune, but the 8-bit music sounds like Bill Clinton stalking you in the shower. The hell can be next? Pornhub in the Garfield years? And then Garfield got assassinated? And then, oh shit, he's dead now. Guess we're closing our doors. The show wasn't originally called Gaming in the Clinton Years. It was a low-budget television broadcast called Flights of Fantasy. Later in the dawn of YouTube, Navigator re-uploaded these videos renaming the show Gaming in the Clinton Years. I spent days researching the history of the show and where it came from, so I will tell you the short version of the history. If you want to know more information, then watch these two videos from this other channel. Here is some of the information I found. George Wood was born in 1955 and was a native in southern Washington, D.C. In 1973, George Wood attended into the University of Maryland Park, and then by 1981 he became a project manager in the National Idea Center, which, if you don't know, was a television network. By 1993, George Wood left the National Idea Center, and later that year he joined BCTV and started the show Flights of Fantasy. The pilot episode was an interview with Scott Hanno, who was a guy who works at Twilight Zone Comics in Maryland. The two talked about cliches in comic books in the 90s. In the pilot of his TV show, he said he will talk about horror movies, card games, collectibles, and did not mention video games. Then, with the next episode, he talked about Sonic 1 and 2. Then after that, he only did video game reviews, but George Wood actually did movie reviews, but not that often, and only talked about Goldeneye and Titanic. A high school student named Tom Allen, who only appeared on screen once, but did all the writing of the episodes. How a high school student ended up working at a television company and did a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, I have no idea. All I know about Tom Allen is he is one of the creators of Gaming in the Clinton Years. Over the years, the show had rebrands, and then until 2001, Tom Allen got fired from BCTV for sending threat emails, and the studio ended up in a lawsuit and went out of business for unknown reasons. After BCTV went out of business, George Wood later founded the company Navigator, which stands for National Academy of Video Game Trade Reviewers. Navigator was a game award company. A lot of gamers that laugh their ass off over the show will ask, Why a random game award company or archive a random show in the 90s? That's because George Wood was in charge of Navigator. Over to the 2010s and into 2020, there were shows related to gaming in the Clinton years, like Retro Hate Mail and reviews run by Tom Sizemore. Yes, Saving Private Ryan, that Tom Sizemore. And my personal favorite, Gaming in the Obama Years. Then, here we are now. These reviews are notorious for being one of the worst reviews ever made. Terrible quality. Actually, this is the 90s. That's acceptable. Points that don't make sense.
Mario Kart 64 is fun to play, except when you're losing.
Really horrible jokes and puns.
Gex Enter the Gecko is Gex's second Gex game. That will get you Gex-cited.
Music that is so loud that you can't hear what George Wood is saying.
On the first few levels is a lot of fun. Bubsy defeats his enemies.
Hell yeah, music is so fucking loud that you can't hear what I'm saying, and I'm gonna shut this down. I want to make this very clear. This is not a hate on this show video. This show is a favorite of mine because of the absurdity of the show and how bad the show is. So do not harass anybody who was ever involved with this show. This show is kind of like the Room of video game reviews. You shouldn't hate on the people who was involved with the show. You should laugh about how horrible this show is and enjoy it. You may notice in the thumbnail that I watched 787 of the worst game reviews ever. Well, sort of. When I am counting 787 reviews, I am counting the videos on the Gaming in the Clinton Years playlist, not the whole channel. Most of what I called reviews are not really reviews. A lot of the videos on the playlist are just walkthroughs or just cutscenes of the games. Some of the videos on the playlist are the few movie reviews George Wood did on the show, so if you want to count the movie reviews as game reviews or not, then go right on ahead. Also, a lot of these videos on the playlist are duplicate uploads. The only difference is that the resolution is different for each upload. With the video that was duplicated, the video goes up from 240p to 360p with the duplicate upload. One of the differences of the duplicate uploads is they are a few sentences longer, just to get more watch time on the channel. What the hell? This is one of the worst organized playlists ever. They just threw random crap and counted them as Gaming in the Clinton Years episodes. The other playlists are organized perfectly fine. Why the hell can't you put the movie reviews and the walkthroughs on their own playlist? Alright, let's go on to these reviews. It'll take 10 hours to talk about all 787 of these reviews, and video games already rotted my brain and I forgot how to do math. I have no idea how to read. I forgot to wipe the Gorilla Glue off my ass. So don't blame me, I haven't been wiping my ass in months, and won't for another 50 years. I'll only be sticking to the reviews that made me laugh or are interesting to talk about. So the first review that I am going to talk about is the only movie review we are going to talk about, Goldeneye. There isn't anything funny in this review or absurd in this episode. What I found interesting in this review is it actually had Martin Campbell and Pierce Brosnan appearing in the episode. I am not sure if the clips are from interviews from other shows or they were filmed for the show. Other than that, there's nothing hilariously wrong with the show. It's just your typical movie review from the 90s with George Wood's style of writing. Speaking of Goldeneye, let's go to the Nintendo 64 game, Goldeneye. Oh boy, I do have some things to say.
The zoom feature on this gun can be awkward though, especially when you're aiming at an alarm button which you want to destroy. There's an easy solution to this problem. Don't use the sniper rifle for aiming at objects.
Snipers are useful in FPS games, George Wood. They are good for shooting people from far away. Haven't you ever played any game with a fucking gun in your life?
In fact, beating the game is impossible on the higher difficulty levels. Do yourself a favor. Don't even try them.
Do you even know about the unlockable levels like the Aztec level from Roger Moore's Moonraker?
The ending is pretty stupid. It reflects the lack of emphasis on cinematic sequences in the game.
It's a movie-based game.
If you beat the game on the hardest mode, you will open up hidden levels for the 4-player minigames, which we can't show you because we only have one controller.
How can you not afford a second controller? You should at least afford a shitty third-party controller.
No one buys a game specifically for multiplayer options.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
When George Wood talks about the games he reviews, he always counts the story of the games as pros and cons, even if this was the 90s and story-driven games like The Last of Us are not as common as they are today. He complained about the story with a movie-based game, but he also complained about the story in a Mario game.
The game would be better if we were treated with plot developments and cinema scenes just like the kind we get at the end of the game.
Have you ever played a Mario game in your life? Peach gets captured and you rescue her ass at the end. That's the story in every frickin' Mario game.
The game is way too short, only 15 main levels. Most players will beat the game in less than 2 weeks.
That's pretty long for a game. Games are supposed to last that long, and it's better than... Do you know what a game review show needs? A versus video. So let's do Super Mario 64 versus Resident Evil. After Super Mario 64 versus Crash Bandicoot or Mario Kart 64 versus Crash Team Racing, you choose Super Mario 64 versus Resident Evil. Two different games with different genres, with different demographics. You're comparing these two games.
Mario has camera motion during gameplay, but Evil only has it during the hands-off cinema scenes.
What pills are you on? Resident Evil doesn't have any camera movement during the cutscenes, not even in the entire game.
Evil has real voices for its characters, but Mario and his friends are mute.
Were you playing this game on mute? Mario never shuts up in that game. George Wood never even finishes the games he reviews because he always uses a code in the game to skip to the final boss and always says the game is too easy and short.
Even though Bubsy is easy, the game is still excellent.
Of course the game was too short and easy. You used a code to skip ahead. The Bubsy, Malin Mallard, and Adam's Family reviews has that issue. This feels like some sort of parody video when he talks about cheating.
If you don't have fun because the game is too difficult, then check out this cool way to cheat.
George Wood gets completely off topic in the games he reviews. With the beginning of every so-called review, he talks about the game like it's a review, then he gives up and decides to do a guide instead. It's like watching a video about someone doing a video game walkthrough on YouTube, and then he rage quits at the game because it was too hard, and at the last second decides to do a game review. That's what watching gaming in the Clinton years is like, only it's switched around. The Toy Story on Super Nintendo review is the most viewed video on the Navigator channel, and it's pretty easy to see why. George Wood was talking about Silicon Graphics computers and not talking about the game in the beginning.
The Toy Story movie was done with Silicon Graphics computers. We don't know, however, if the game actually used Silicon Graphics computers. With Silicon Graphics computers, Silicon Graphics computers.
Silicon Graphics computers. These 3 words will be nailed to your brain and into your soul for the rest of your life. Not only this show cheats and goes off topic, but it is also one of the most wishy-washy shows ever broadcasted on television. George Wood praises a game for realism in a game. he reviews, and then episodes later, he says realism in video games is stupid.
That is one annoying flaw. So much for realism. Hello? Ants can crawl anywhere. They don't need mushroom trampolines. Besides, when was the last time you saw an ant as big as a mushroom? Realism is getting boring in video games.
Even with his reviews, he says the game is good, and then 5 seconds later, he says that the game is frustrating.
Everything about this game is top-notch. The game is virtually impossible to beat, making it overwhelmingly frustrating for younger players. Even older players will probably not win the game.
The most infamous review was the Final Fantasy VII review. It was so controversial that they made a second review after the angry letters, with the first review of FF7 being narrated by Sean Benedict, and he talked about the sound effects and minor things about the game instead of actual reasons the game isn't that good. The first review was so controversial that George Wood made a response with all the hate the review got. The claims George Wood made didn't make a single bit of sense.
The movie scenes that advance the plot are separated with much too long periods of play.
It is a video game, what the fuck do you expect? Not only did George Wood respond to their Final Fantasy VII controversy, but they also made videos talking about the new rating system back in the 90s that I made a video months back, so let's see his perspective.
The leading fighting games are, of course, the Mortal Kombat series, the Street Fighter series, and Killer Instinct. The violence level in all of these games is relatively the same, although Street Fighter generally has less graphic violence.
There's a difference between bleeding violence and violence. Alright.
Games are rated nowadays, and even if they weren't rated, parents could still tell which games are violent. It's called looking at the back of the box, or just reading the title.
Then he shows titles of the games that are violent, like Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct. The whole idea of a rating system is to have parents have an idea what kind of content is in games. You can't just judge a game based on its title or the writing in the front of the box. Mostly, George Wood was controversial for having an opinion.
The Legend of Zelda. Not as good as the original for some unknown reason. Tried ending ceremony for all that hard work. Very difficult.
What the fuck? You can't say A Link to the Past isn't as good as the original for unknown reasons and just call it a day.
Illusion of Gaia. One of the best stories ever for a video game. Someone please turn this into a movie. Be forewarned, the pig sacrifice is a shocking dramatic twist.
What in the mother of cock? That's it? Alright, I will do one more episode before I wrap everything up.
In Tomb Raider 3, create a storyline in which Lara gets breast cancer. Imagine the drama.
I'm going outside, window 10, please! I can't feel my legs. There's glass in my eye. Now that I am back from the emergency room, let's wrap things up for real. And I might get COVID-19 because I was at the hospital. So, what had George Wood been up to? I honestly don't know. Navigator claims that George Wood died in 2006, but I know he's still alive. There were interviews with George Wood, and there was this Halloween special from last year, so obviously he is still alive. That's all I know what George Wood had been up to. So, that's gaming in the Clinton years, or flights of fantasy, whatever you want to call it. This show is the butt of many jokes on the internet, and it will have a legacy. That does not mean the show is terrible, because it is, and it will be a classic for many years to come. One more thing I would like to tell you is this.
If you do not get this amazing new generation of Donkey Kong madness, you are stupid. Yes, I know, that's insulting, but it's also the truth.